The subject of Alternative Views News Magazine for the evening is boy prostitution, the widespread use and abuse of male children for sexual purposes. Some of the language in the program may be offensive to some people. Admittedly, the whole subject is offensive.
Investigations in other cities have shown that boys 13, 14, even younger are coerced into prostitution with threats of physical violence and are sometimes shipped across state lines, shipped to the older adult men who desire young boys for sexual acts. Occasionally, these boys' episodes with their older clients ends in physical violence. There are men who seek young boys to torture and sometimes to kill. Young boy prostitutes, 14 and 15 years old, explained one reason they sell their bodies to older men is for money. For some, especially the runaways, the money means survival. A child and adolescent psychiatrist explained another motivation, as revenge against a father, stepfather, or older man who sexually molested him at an earlier age.
Best information I have is that these kids die. They waste away, they kill themselves, somebody kills them. That's it. And we're talking about over half. Over half of the kids who make their living this way for a period don't survive adolescence.
The slaughter of the innocents. It's the greatest slaughter of the innocents since Herod. And it goes on and on and on. And when the public gets a hint of it, nothing happens.
Part 2 of Boys for Sale, the tragedy of male children being sexually exploited by older men, tonight on Alternative Views News Magazine. In our previous program, the first section of this two-part series on Boys for Sale, the widespread use and abuse of youths for the gratification of various men around the country, we talked about the general nature, who's involved, what kids, where they come from, how they got involved in it, the nature of the men themselves, the ages, the fact that they come from the highest, the socio-economic and political stratum of the American society. The fact that this is a very widespread thing and that it is hushed up generally, and it's extremely violent. Kids are killed, many kids are killed and tortured every year, as well as abused. Tom Philpott is still with us, history professor at the University of Texas. Mark McKinnon, former editor of the Daily Texan. But before we get into tonight's program further, we will review some of the most important points of the first section of Boys for Sale for people who may not have seen the first program.
Investigations in other cities have shown that boys 13, 14, even younger are coerced into prostitution with threats of physical violence and are sometimes shipped across state lines, shipped to the older adult men who desire young boys for sexual acts. Occasionally, these boys' episodes with their older clients ends in physical violence. There are men who seek young boys to torture and sometimes to kill.
The President's Commission on Obscenity found, this is the commission that Richard Nixon repudiated, it mentioned in passing that child pornography was a phenomenon of the abuse of children, and then went on to say that for every female prostitute of any age in the United States, there are 9 boys underage who are prostitutes. And there was a call boy ring operated out of New York City, which had phone hookups with Houston, Atlanta, Los Angeles, New Orleans, Washington, D.C. And that callboy ring had a list of 10,000 clients who could call and with a credit card purchase a boy. Hello?
Hello, this is credit card number 06789. I'd like to make an order, please.
Go ahead.
I'm looking for a young male, blonde hair, blue eyes.
Body hair or no body hair?
Thick body hair, please.
What age?
10 to 12.
Butch or femme?
Butch, please.
What is your address?
I'm at the Houston Marriott Hotel, room 313.
Wire me $200 now by credit card and have $100 in cash for the boy. He'll be there in 30 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.
In Houston, I give the figure based on, I think, prudent calculations that upwards of 350 boys a year are killed deliberately because of this. Many more die of drug overuse, malnutrition, of suicide. The national toll per year is in the thousands every year. Kids die violently because of this. And to the best of my knowledge, most men who seek sex from boys are not homosexuals. To the extent that they have active sex lives at the peer level, they are heterosexual. Many of them have no peer sex at all. There are gay people who are what we call pederasts, that is, men who lust after children, especially boys. But it appears to be the case that most such men are not gay, that their attraction is for young, defenseless children, especially boys, because they're more exotic and more forbidden. But it is not a matter of gay rights as advocated by practically anybody. This is a much different sort of phenomenon. The reason that the gay community usually scorns any investigation of the subject is that they know that the average person in the public will blame homosexuals and homosexuality for the phenomenon, regardless of what facts are presented.
The kind of individuals involved are down the line, almost in every instance, in the cases I've investigated, men who are very powerful, usually very wealthy, and usually administrate control over a large number of people.
16-year-old Boyd came to us telling how he'd started as a prostitute at age 12 and now is employed by a large Houston corporation. The corporation pays him from a well-covered slush fund.
I'm working right now, like just, with the corporation. And
what's that? How's that work?
Well, when their executives or, their business people are in town, they're sent to our apartment, and we entertain them while they're here.
Okay, what's that entertainment usually involve? What do they usually demand, or what do they want?
Well, it's all kinds of sex and perversions. There's no two alike. I've decided that.
Subsequent to the making of this interview, this boy's mutilated body was found.
It's closely attached to the major financial, commercial, industrial, educational institutions of our society. It's run by the same people who run those. It's frequented by the same people who occupy management positions in those. It's not the mafia. It's an adjunct of clean business. It's serving the most respectable people we have in our society, the people who are the elite.
The Texas House Committee has been charged with looking at the problem. 2 public hearings later, the committee has been unable to make any serious progress. Its budget was slashed from $80,000 to $15,000, hardly enough to do an honest probe. And the committee chairman admits to knowing of the problem in Houston, but says he's been told to back off.
When we started this committee, we asked for money to do an adequate investigation to determine just how serious the problem of child pornography, child prostitution, sexual exploitation is here in Texas, which I think is a proper thing for this committee to do. Now, that was the first indication that we had pressure on us. The second indication was when I appeared before the House Administration Committee, when they chopped our budget, and subsequent conversations with certain members that said, we have got to stop our investigation.
Why do they want you to stop?
I don't know why. I have no...
Do you plan to find out?
I plan to find out. I think it's serious that they were getting this kind of pressure.
Let's continue talking about this situation. You have a story here which kind of is good for several aspects of who's involved, what happens to them, and what doesn't happen to them.
Okay, I'll read a wire service release which came out of Dallas, and which said at the top, broadcasters note nature, repeated, broadcasters note nature, and also said, note discretionary material. Here's the copy. A 30-year State Human Resources Department employee has been arrested in Dallas on charges of sexually abusing a child. The Department of Human Resources officials say 55-year-old Howard Ray Parker was suspended yesterday from his job as Medical Services Programs Director, that's statewide. Police say they found 200 to 300 pictures of nude boys in Parker's home.
Wow.
Officers say a 16-year-old runaway boy alleged Parker had sex with him while he lived with Parker. A spokesman for the Department of Human Resources in Dallas says the 30-year veteran employee charged on sex offenses has been suspended without pay. It goes on to say that this is routine procedure. Repeats that he's charged with the abuse of a child he picked up on the street as the kid was hitchhiking. Says that the boy alleges that Parker kept him in that apartment of his for a month, and that Parker repeatedly attacked him during that time. Police say a search of Parker's house uncovered 200 to 300 photographs of boys in various states of attire, and many showed them engaging in sex. Now, it happens to be the case that those boys were charges of the Department of Human Resources. And here's what happened in the case. Mr. Parker went under the care of a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist said that prosecution would be damaging to Mr. Parker and prevent his recovery. The judge took that into consideration in the pretrial hearing and let him go. And the state of Texas paid for his psychiatric care, and they returned him to the job after his rehabilitation.
He went back to work?
He went back to work.
What about the kids? Did they do anything to rehabilitate them?
Whatever they were supposed to be doing in the first place.
Let's take a look at the children involved and their lives. Robin Lloyd, author of For Money or Love, the definitive book on boy prostitution in America.
I think that it's been described as a national horror. I don't think it's a national horror. I think it's a national tragedy. My findings are that the boys that get into this, as described in the title of the book, For Money or Love, they're not really in it for the money. I think that they're in it for what they perceive to be adult attention or adult affection. That's where it becomes a tragedy. If you take a 12-year-old boy who comes into a strange town, he's broke, he's cold, he doesn't have anything, he's hungry, and then the other street boys will tell him, hey, you know, you've got something you can sell. And he finds he has this marketable commodity I mentioned earlier. So now he goes to the apartment with a strange man. They go to bed together. The next day he's out on the street, and he's looking for now the same kind of protection that same night.
Their life is sad. It's 100% sad. They get up, you know, 1 or 2 or 3 during the day, and they go out and they have to earn money, and they're treated bad. They eat only when they're fed by somebody else, and they never get anything for anything. They always have to return sexual favors for it. They sometimes get beaten, they get robbed, they get pushed. You know, the police abuse them, everybody abuses them.
What do you do with the money?
When I have to stay with somebody, I pay them that, or just give me something to eat when I need it. And I buy me some shoes or some socks, whatever I need.
How much you guys getting for tricks? You gotta be able to make some bucks.
We gotta get more than $5. Trying to get some money, but when we need it bad. $20 for the days over.
Oh, no.
So I can make money, man. There's no other way.
No other way you can make money? That's true, there ain't.
Can't find no coke bottles around these days. People already took them all up.
Oh, I know.
I can't get a job. I don't get a job.
Yeah.
Most of the kids don't want to be where they are. They don't want to
engage in this lifestyle. And if you give them help, an awful lot of them, a very high percentage of them, are quite anxious either to go home or to get a job, go back to school, to live a normal, happy life. They are not into this really rotten thing because they like it. If they stay in it long enough, they develop attitudes that make it very difficult for them to do anything else. If you work here in our center and you do not develop a bad memory,